Grand friends, I think we will get started. I think there's more coming, I'm sure, but also I'm aware we've clashed with some other things, unfortunately, today, but I'm sure we'll still have a great discussion. For those of you I don't know, I'm David Hope-Jones, the Chief Executive of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership, and welcome to this, our third and final in our series of 3 events that we've called our summer sessions. As we move into the autumn, we're going to go back to, well, I suppose, hybrid events, still trying to get as much Malawian input as we can. But having that sort of face-to-face experience often in the Edinburgh City Chambers. But we recognise that over the summer months, it's harder to convene in person. So our summer sessions have looked to do something slightly different, shorter meetings, purely digital, but also very much informal and discursive. It's about listening and sharing. So there's no standard agenda, there's no fixed speakers, but rather a really open space to be able to share views. So please do, I'll say a few words of maybe introduction and set the scene a little bit. But the really important thing is I'm going to turn to you in a moment for your opinions and really encourage everyone to share whatever they wish on today's theme of digital inclusivity. This is, as I said, the third of 3. The first for this series was on power in partnerships in June. In July, we were talking about sustainability, and today, as I say, it's about digital inclusivity. Chocolate biscuit to anyone that's been there for all 3. All the videos of the past meetings are available on our website. We're going to record today's meeting just like all of the others, and just like all of the others, the full recording will be there. If when you're giving a comment, if you really want to do so in a more confidential space, you can preface your comment with, I don't want this recorded. But really encourage you, unless there's a specific reason that you want it not to be recorded, to allow us to show the whole video as we have done so far. And what we might do, as I've said at the beginning of each of the sessions so far, at the end of the series, is to pull out some of the real sort of nuggets of expertise and find innovative ways to make to build audiences for those little nuggets, because not everyone's going to come and watch a full sort of 60-minute long video. And again, I suppose that links to today's themes of digital inclusivity and accessibility. The same comments as always on mutual respect. Please do respect others' views, even if they're different to your own. This is a space where we think it's healthy to hear things that you perhaps disagree with, and that doesn't mean anyone's beyond being challenged and a vibrant discussion, but please, as always, be respectful. But I don't think we've ever actually had an issue in that space. I'm keen to also say I'm acutely aware of the irony of having a discussion about digital inclusivity on an online platform. We've sent a number of messages over the last couple of months asking how do we do this in a way that is as inclusive as possible. But I'm the first to recognise that looking around, the overwhelming participants today are in Scotland. Now, that's not the case over the course of all of our events. Looking back at our statistics over the last year, the majority of attendees to SMP events, ostensibly in Scotland, have been Malawians joining from Malawi, but there's always more that we can do. But I think it's useful to have this discussion and have this sharing about this question of digital inclusivity when we're working online. How do we make it as easy as possible for Malawians to join? We've scheduled for an hour. It might be less than that. That's absolutely fine. It's a chat. Think of this as the sort of water cooler conversations that we would otherwise have. Many of our members say that the best conversations that they have at an SMP event are queuing up for the Mizuzu coffee or Malawi gin. So please see this as an informal time to be able to share. What I'm going to do in a moment, I think that's everything I had to say in introducing the session. I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to read out, firstly, the questions that we set for this session. Now, we're not going to sort of dogmatically go through those one by one, but if things dry up, I might return to those questions. But hopefully those trigger some of your thoughts. And then I'm going to throw it open if anyone's ready at that point to share. But also I'm really happy from my perspective to share, I suppose, the journey that we've been on, the SMP, and some of my thoughts on digital inclusivity. And if that's useful, I can do that as a sort of, I don't know, almost a sort of a stimuli or a provocation for further discussion. But we'll just play it by ear. So those questions that we set, there's about a dozen or so, and I'll just quickly read them out. And hopefully this just gets the juices flowing, gets you thinking about the sort of things that we want to be talking about. And first, I suppose, a definition, what do we mean by digital inclusivity? It's a bit jargony. To put it bluntly, it's when we do things in the digital realm, who is able to participate and who isn't. So those questions, what has changed in your partnership in terms of digital working since March 2020? Secondly, what have been the advantages of digital working in your partnership? What have been the disadvantages of digital working in your partnership? What are the blockers to digital participation in Malawi and Scotland? And crucially, who is excluded? Can you share an example of an approach you've taken or have been involved with and have seen which you think has been really helpful in building digital inclusivity? Should we be endeavouring that digital cooperation will ultimately replace most Scotland-Malawi flights as part of our fight against the climate crisis? What more, in very tangible terms, can we do as individuals and as a community to challenge and support digital inclusivity? How does gender and digital inclusion intersect? And how do we support digital and gender equality? I'm going to put those in the chat bar and throw it open at this stage for any input. Now you can input, you can put up your hand digitally, you can turn your video on and wave, you can put a comment in the chat box, but just throwing it open just now. Any hands up just yet? If anyone wants to go first, you're very welcome to, and if not, I'm happy to give, as I said, some reflections from our side. Moira, fantastic. I can see your hand up. Moira, over to you. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for hosting this. It's very useful. I belong to the Mamie Martin Fund. We support girls' education in Malawi. We're a very small, charity. And it just occurred to me when you were speaking that, you know, I'd been thinking about this question in terms of our partners, colleagues and friends in Malawi and their ability or otherwise to link up with us. And it occurred to me I'm starting at the wrong place here, because one of the things the pandemic did, nobody wants it back, is that all of us had to get ourselves online and geared up. And the idea of, well, I don't like online meetings, that's such a kind of pre-2019 or pre-2020 phrase, isn't it? I don't like online meetings, what, you know. So we, as a very small organization, and I know we're not alone here, and I think actually faith-based organizations are very interesting leaders in this field. We got ourselves, you know, able to do stuff like that. So we started to meet online, and then because we were able to do it, it made it easier for our staff in Malawi and our partners in Malawi to join. So I'm just reflecting on that I was looking at those questions from the wrong end, or from a, you know, I was assuming there was only one end to look at it. And yeah, and I have a lot to say about the cost of internet connection in Malawi, the whole kind of power situation, power in terms of electricity, and you know, all those issues. But actually, that's not the only issue, is it?
Great points. Thanks very much, Moira. Absolutely, we need to think carefully about what's our starting point and what perspective are we looking at this from. Just again, if you put up a digital hand or a comment, and perhaps just while I'm waiting, I'll say a few reflections, if I may, from our side. I know for us, you know, it's been a really challenging time, COVID, but also quite an exciting time. The fact that international travel really hasn't, for most of the last 3 years, been happening in anything like the scale that it did before, has been a time of reflection for us. And I think generally, and less so in this meeting, slightly ironically, we've seen far greater inclusion in Malawi. As I say, you know, we've had Malawi cross-party group meetings in the Scottish Parliament we've facilitated, which have 75% of participants joining from Malawi, Malawians joining from Malawi, and sort of gone are those days of having a group of sort of, you know, Scott's talking about Malawi with no Malawian present. The overwhelming majority of our meetings have a large number of Malawians feeding in different perspectives. But I suppose there is this big question of who actually in Malawi is able to participate, and absolutely appreciate what Moira was saying there, that it's more than that question. But I suppose, yeah, again, as a provocation, I was thinking just before this meeting, what is it? What have we learned about the reasons that it's been hard for Malawi to take part in digital? And I'm a big fan of alliteration, so I came up with 5 C's, and I'll perhaps very briefly call through those. But please do put a comment in the chat box or put up your hand. I'm really keen to hear your views. But yeah, I suppose the 5 C's for me are a connectivity, which is the access to the physical hardware, although, you know, the proliferation of smartphones has made it much easier. Internet access, as in whether you can actually get it, and access to electricity. But I think that's all of that is much less of an issue than the second one, which Moira has said, and that is cost. And I want to pull up a really interesting graphic here. Just 1 second to share while I share my screen. There we go. Hopefully that pops up in a moment. And we were sent this. This is from July 2020. Probably most of you have seen it. It's from a website, the Visual Capitalist, and this was July 2020. And it's a really nice sort of infographic here showing the relative costs of 1 gigabyte of mobile data. And the reason this was particularly of interest for us is at this point in July 2020, Malawi was the most expensive country. This was using data sourced from O2. The most expensive country, where 1 gigabyte of data cost $27.41. And just for reference here, right down here, you can see the United Kingdom, one of the cheapest countries, and Malawi, one of the most expensive countries. We're aware that this is now a couple of years old. So I was doing a bit of research before today and found a separate source, cable.co.uk, that is a bit more up to date, as 2022. And if you download from this site, their calculations, it comes, Malawi's quite different. Malawi's 149 most expensive country, so far more in the middle. But I think whichever way you look at it, I think, you know, it's absolutely clear that Malawi is extremely expensive compared to Malawi. And I suppose if you layered that data of how much does it cost against GNI per capita, you know, against them, and per day is in Malawi about £1.81. So relative to earnings in Malawi, the cost is huge. The third thing, the third C that I suppose I would highlight is credit cards. And this is something we've really seen in our relationship with our sister network, MASP, that it's almost impossible in Malawi to get credit cards that are internationally recognized. And you sort of don't realize how many digital subscription-based services actually we use, you know, whether it is, you know, MailChimp or SurveyMonkey or Mindomo, or even paying to register a website. You know, we have to do that, use an SMP credit card here to support our sister network in Malawi to be able to access actually those day-to-day tools that don't cost a huge amount, maybe £5 or £10 a month, but you can't actually do it very easily from Malawi. And my 2 final C's, and then really am keen to hear from you. So please do put up your hand digitally to share your views. But the 4th one is clarity. And this is something that we've heard from consultations earlier on this year from Malawi about knowing, what's this meeting about? Do I need to be there? Who's going to be there? And, you know, if you're making a real investment, not just of time, but of money, clarity about what a meeting's about. And my final C, and this is where I get my alliterative crowbar out to get it fit, culture and timings. And I suppose for us, that's about, you know, how is the meeting run, but also when is it scheduled for? You know, the time difference in the summer is 1 hour, in the winter it's 2 hours. We were talking about a meeting as a team yesterday, and when do we schedule it? And it's really hard. That we wanted primarily to focus on Scottish teachers, so quite fixed times that it needed to be for there. But that sort of twilight time of about 5:30 p.m. UK time, you add an hour onto that, and actually you're then, you know, it's dark in Malawi. It's not safe so much to walk home. It's a difficult time to have meetings. So thinking about the culture of meetings, but also crucially the timings and the time difference. Again, recognizing that the working day starts much earlier in Malawi and it finishes much earlier. That's already more waffle than I wanted to give. I don't know if anyone, I can see Stuart's hand up, perhaps Stuart, and then I don't know, Susan Algetti, if you wanted to share any thoughts at all. Stuart, over to you.
Thanks, David. It's actually just to share 3 points from Mick James, one of our members who's not able to join today. He offers 3 learning points, the main one being the cost of data in Malawi being prohibitive and a real block to digital. Also, what he sees as a telecoms duopoly in Malawi, and that it's some other African countries are already well down the track of trying to break that and provide more accessibility at a more affordable price. The third point's hardware, and Mick says that the Turing Trust is doing a fantastic job, but Scotland more broadly could perhaps do much more. I'm very much paraphrasing from Mick's messages here, but I know that we're joined on the line today by Doreen Luhanga from CYD and the Turing Trust. So perhaps if Doreen's happy to come in after Susan, David, through you, that would be great.
Thanks so much, Stuart, and by extension, thanks Mick as well. So I was slightly picking on you there, Susan, but absolutely, if we could hear Susan, if you had any thoughts, great to hear it. But then Doreen, if you are happy to, would love to hear the Malawian perspective from the Turing Trust. Susan, any reflections from yourself? Sorry, on mute at the moment.
Sorry about that. My reflection stems back to 2006, around about festival time. I remember texting, it was SMS then, a new friend in Malawi, just to say I was in Princes Street waiting for a bus, and Peter came back and said what he was doing. And it was just a revelation, just one of those moments when you realised that the world was absolutely tiny and that digital had the ability to shrink the world in a very positive and a very negative way. I've just seen earlier there is a survey that shows 34% of Malawians who have smartphones use them to access pornography. So, you know, the world is the same the world over, unfortunately. But the big issues of cost of data and of connectivity are issues that we can't resolve but need to take on board. But I wonder if there's anything more that we can do in terms of lobbying. If I ran the World Bank or whatever, I would just connect the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, but I don't run the World Bank, so I can't. I think we should never underestimate the use of WhatsApp. This is just on a practical level, because before COVID, Malawians you took to WhatsApp probably quicker than we did in Scotland. And I mean, I use it all the time to connect with people. We try and use Zoom or Teams for meetings, but quite often the network will drop depending on what time of day it is. And whatever, so WhatsApp is while it's not ideal, and it's useful for phone calls as well, is not ideal, but it's very quick and very reliable platform. And then just on gender equality, I'll go back to hardware for a moment, because I'm really interested in what Doreen has to say, and I know that Turing Trust does some really good work. But we should never underestimate, again, the amount of Chinese, basically, hardware that's available in Malawi, whether it's smartphones or laptops. So sometimes I think maybe taking stuff over or shipping stuff over is not the answer. The answer is actually people having the resources to buy stuff actually in country. On gender equality, smartphones or basic phones from a personal safety point of view are really helpful for young girls and women. But from an educational point of view, I think the world has just started to tap into the potential of digital for education. And I would like to see Scotland and Malawi working together. I know that Mick James, for example, has done some work on that, and others are too, but I think there's huge potential in using digital in education. And that's it.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Susan. Absolutely. I dread to think what the percentage of smartphones actually pornography is in the UK, but I'm sure it'll be more than
much higher.
34. But no, a great challenge. You know, what can we do to change? And I think it's important that we think about, don't be afraid to sort of to lobby, but also what can we do within our gift as how do we use digital? I think is really important. And absolutely, I think it's been a big change in hardware in the last 5 years. China really doing a lot more to sell new phones at a cost, at a price point that's more accessible across Africa, and it's slightly taken the market out of repurposed and recycled phones for the African market for better or worse. But it's great that there is, you know, new smartphones that are available in Malawi, and absolutely digital education. There was a Scottish government funded project, embarrassing, I'm trying to remember who ran it some time ago, was looking at about iPads and digital education. As you say, Mick's done some work in this space. We had a good meeting with August the SMP, the Minister of Education, last year, where we talked a bit about digital education. I definitely think there's more in that space in her priorities as minister. That's a really key part of it. So I think that's a great challenge, that there's more that we can do in that space. I wonder, Doreen, if you are happy to come in from the Malawian Turing Trust perspective.
Eric, thank you very much. Yeah, I think just to add on to what has already been said, on what you're talking about how data is expensive in Malawi and through the COVID period that happened. But for us with Turing Trust, we have been working ever since before the COVID. Actually, we've been working because they have to work from Scotland and we have to work from Malawi. So most of our communication has been done online. So we have explored a lot of ways on how best we can be communicating. Aside from the emails, we do Zoom meetings most of the time. But then mostly, I think what Susan mentioned about WhatsApp, we do use WhatsApp a lot, because as it is the most cheaper option when it comes to online communication in Malawi, looking at how the data is expensive, and also we have packages that are specifically for WhatsApp. So you have a cheaper data bundle for WhatsApp. So that's sort of like accessible to everyone, and it's cheap as well. So we use it for calls and messaging. Sometimes we of course we have tried to use for video, but then the quality is a little bit lower. But then I think for other options, we do use other options, but then WhatsApp is also something that we do use. And also when it comes to, I think education, I think some of the teachers were exploring during the COVID period to use WhatsApp with the students, because almost every parent and some students do own a smartphone. So teachers were just exploring around on how best they can get information and assignments to students. It wasn't really, it was more often like a teacher's effort, not really the school as a whole to say that that's the platform that they're using. But then it was just a matter of the teacher exploring to see if they can use that as an option. So that was that. But then, like I think someone also mentioned it, the access to computers in Malawi. Most of the students have access to computers only in schools. So during the COVID period, the schools were closed, and that also meant no access to the computers. So that's where the option for using WhatsApp came in. But then it's not really ideal, because it was more like a trial and error experience where teachers have to see how best they can use it. So it's and also it was also up to the parents if they're willing to lend their phone to the kids so they can use it for that purpose. So I think that's what I can add.
Doreen, thank you very much indeed. That's extremely useful to have the Malawian perspective, and I see others agreeing in the chat box as well about WhatsApp, both its ease of use in Malawi, but also cost. I see Stacia has asked questions about, Claire has asked questions about what's the best platform for digital meetings. I'm really keen to listen to Malawians' answer to this question. I mean, very anecdotally, you know, our sense from listening to our Malawi partner in MASP is is that Zoom is better than Teams, but I don't know if that's just the sort of their specific IT setup. Can I pause there? Anyone from Malawi on the specific question of what is the most inclusive of the major video conferencing platforms? Anyone from Malawi that could answer that question?
I think if I can start on that, I think for us, we have used Zoom as well as Google Meet. I think Google Meet has also been like a great asset for us, aside from Zoom. So I feel like they don't really use much bandwidth, so it's better to use it. Even with our data that we have, we are able to afford it and be able to communicate effectively. Yes.
Fantastic, Dorian. Thank you very much indeed. And I see there's a consensus in the chat box so far, but please do feel free to disagree. And obviously most interested in perspectives from Malawi, but that Zoom is better than Teams, but Google Meet is perhaps comparable to Zoom. Any other thoughts? I see Stacey has put in the chat box some really useful data there with good links. I think there's a hand up from Blessing. Is that right? I might have missed that earlier on. Apologies. Blessing, if you would like to jump in, over to you. Blessing, I'm just gonna jump in. Sorry to interrupt. It's just a little bit quiet at the moment. It might be my speaker. Apologies. But really keen to hear from you. Back to you, Blessing, and perhaps a little bit louder would help. Thank you.
All right. Most of the time here in Malawi, we do use Telegram than Google Meet. So Telegram, it requires less bundle than Zoom and Google Meet. So that's what I can add right now.
Blessing, that's extremely useful. Thank you very much. And to that question, to that comment, any other feedback on Telegram at all? Has anyone else used Telegram? I must put my hand up and say I haven't used Telegram before. Any thoughts from anyone on that? I see Stacia. Do you want to speak your point? Are you happy to say that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm usually in Malawi, but I happen to be at my mother's house right now, so it's very early in the morning for me. I use them all, and I work with digital technology in Malawi as a nutritionist. I've been there 25 years. I find a lot of people don't use Telegram. I'm on a lot of Telegram groups, but they're very, very quiet compared to WhatsApp. Airtel provides a bundle for WhatsApp. So if we could get the digital companies to provide a bundle for other services, which I know they're open to those kind of conversations, we could have that over.
So I was just scribbling that down. That's a really, really useful point, and I didn't know that. In all honesty, we do have good connections into Airtel and some of the other networks in Malawi. So having that conversation, I think, is a really valid and an important thing for us to do as a network. Stacia, thanks so much, and thanks especially for the early start. I talked about culture and time differences, and appreciate that particularly acute for you this morning. While waiting for other inputs, and please just put up your digital hand or your literal hand and wave. Perhaps if I just take a few moments, if I may, to share just some of the tools that I've found useful, if I may. And hopefully what's going to pop up there is just Google. And I want to show you this just because it's so easy to find if you forget about it, forget the name. That if you just Google transfer credit to phone credit to Malawi. In fact, it's not the top one there, but it usually is. Ding is a service that I've just recently started using, and you can see there really easy to navigate. You come straight into it there. If I put a number in here, in fact, I'll just show it to you in action. Just 1 second. Let's have a look. Sorry, I'm having to pull up a mobile number. So if I just do this here and start top up, you can see straight away the different packages that you can buy. So this morning I just did this as a tester to a friend in Malawi, transferred £7.49 to get £7,462 credit, kwacha credit. And that's the receipt there that I got. So you can see, cost me £7.49. There was an admin cost of £1.37, but worked really well. I genuinely, it took probably 3 minutes to do the entire transaction, and that phone was on that credit was on a friend's phone in Malawi. So I definitely recommend Ding if you're looking to refund partners in Malawi, and it gets around that problem. Where's the money going? Is it definitely going to support this? And you could even do it. We were talking in the team about how we would do it. You can even do it where someone could join a meeting, and if you've used, say, Eventbrite for a booking system, and if they need credit to do it, once they've joined the meeting, you could then, if your admin is quick enough, transfer credit for them to be able to stay in the meeting. The other bit of technology I wanted to share is a new web-based money transfer service, web and app-based, which we're involved in, called Moto Money. And this has been driven by the Malawian diaspora in the UK, really annoyed at how much it costs to transfer money to Malawi. So we've been really actively involved in the development of this app, and it's going to be launched very, very shortly, which is in the final trial stages. And what I think is great, there's lots of different ways that you can transfer money, but for me, this is probably the most intuitive. And what's really most, I think, effective about Moto Money when it launches is you could have, say, £50, you connect it to your bank account, transfer £50, and that could go to 50 transactions to £1 for 50 different people. They get an SMS in Malawi. They're able to go to their nearest bank and literally get the equivalent of £1 in quite cost-effective, but also admin-effective ways to be able to do cash transfers in very effective ways. So Ding for transferring credit, Moto Money for transferring money, especially to groups. I guess other opportunities, technology, WhatsApp, we've talked about. Audio messages on WhatsApp we found really useful to communicating between Scotland and Malawi, that you can just leave a sort of a 3-minute audio message, and it's a way to really be able to listen well to Malawi, and I think more popular at the Malawian side. And the final, I suppose, opportunity that I would recommend is the communication and resource centres in Malawi. Our sister network MASP has CRCs, as we call them, in Mzuzu, in Lilongwe and Blantyre, grand titles, but really just a room with computers. And so they are open for anyone in Malawi to be able to use, to be able to support their bilateral relationship with Scotland. So if you want your Malawian partners to be able to join a meeting, and if they're near Mzuzu, Blantyre or Lilongwe, we can, with MASP, contact us that they can use that space without charge to be able to use computers to be able to join meetings. So I'm keen that we do more to use the CRCs. I don't know whether Ken Undi, I can see, has joined us here. Ken, I'm not sure when you joined, but it's just an open space sharing around the points of digital inclusivity. Ken's a good friend of the Scotland-Malawi partnership. Ken, if you wanted to share your views on digital inclusivity from Malawi, we would really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. But if you don't mind, I can just take like a few minutes, then I'll come back anytime soon. Thank you.
No problem at all, Ken. Very mean of me to put you on the spot. Any other thoughts or input? You can put up your hand or put a comment in the chat box. I wonder whether, Stacey, if you could say a little bit about, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, XOOM with an X rather than a Z. It's not something I knew about.
I use PayPal, so it's a PayPal service, but I find it very well connected to anything that I want to transfer to. I can transfer to a bank account or a phone, and I've been very happy with the charges. So it's only, I've come home for a family medical issue, and I'm continuing my work in Malawi, so I had to find a better way to transfer money. And I've also saved yours, and I'm going to compare them and see. There are so many of the phone credit ones, and I would have to tease them out and see which one is the best, but actually transferring money, this is what I found is the easiest and quickest. I mean, within a minute, it's in somebody's phone. but I missed the first 10 minutes of what you were talking about. I've always tried to get on your sessions because I like the people that I interact with in Malawi that are linked to what you do. But I work in this topic, so I'm happy to try and help answer questions too.
Fantastic.
I mean, I can link you later with some networks too that are working on some of the things I've talked about.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's a hugely useful offer. Thank you very much. And I think what would be useful from this is to be able to come up with a list of here are the different tools that are out there. Here are the resources and what people think of it. So let's do that afterwards. We'll be in contact, Stacia. I hope I'm saying your name right, Stacia. To be able to pick your brains and those of others. I can see Moira's hand is very patiently up. Moira, over to you.
Thanks, David. Just what Stacia is saying about using PayPal, can I just give a kind of warning here about that PayPal is such a really easy service to use as a user. As a merchant, so it's impossible, simply impossible. So that as an organization, if we were wanting to send money, it's simply no use with PayPal. I read something, a small organization, a small business said on social media recently, after a 3-year battle with PayPal, we're now able to offer blah, blah on as you can pay by PayPal. Well, actually, I've given up long before the 3 years. Perhaps it's actually going on kind of 10 years we've been trying. It's just hopeless. They don't, if you're a kind of standard organization, particularly registered in England, that'll be a big help. There's all sorts of things and it's impossible. So I just kind of, sorry, I don't wish to rant about PayPal. I've just already mortgaged too much of my life to PayPal and we've decided we're so not having it done it at all. And that's why, yeah, that's why, you see, yes, I wasn't understanding, Stacia, because you mentioned it in relation to Zoom, or however you say. I don't know if you want to elaborate on it. That, but as an individual, that would be grand. But as an organisation, it's not possible for us to have a PayPal account.
That's really
yeah, I've had so many problems with PayPal over the years, and I don't know if PayPal has made Zoom for that purpose. But Zoom is what I use. It just happens to be linked to my PayPal account. I still find PayPal useful for some things, but that's the other thing is I have a massive list of things that I use because different things in different situations work. So as I looked into Modo Money, it's great for Europe, but I'm not sure if it's going to be great for USA. So you have to know your list of things and you have to keep up. Get somebody good on your team that can keep up with the new things coming out. Over.
Absolutely, and that's where I hope we can be of use as a network, because small charities, like Mammy Martin funds, don't have necessarily the capacity to or the time or the bandwidth to be able to keep looking at new technology. So I really want to be useful, and I think creating that sharing space about technology that's there. I can see a question from Yusuf Khurshid, and my apologies, Yusuf, if I've mispronounced the name. Yusuf's question is around electricity in Malawi, and what are the underlying issues affecting access to electricity. I'm happy to give my understanding of the answer to that question, but defer to, most importantly, colleagues on the call from Malawi to correct my understanding, which might be a few years out of date, and indeed members, I'm sure, who may know more. My understanding is that Malawi, with its population of now just over 20 million people, around 9.5 or 10% of them have access to electricity. However, that is overwhelmingly focused in the urban areas, and it's important to emphasize those that do have access to electricity suffer very regular blackouts and what's called brownouts as well. So planned constraints on the electricity network. My understanding is that a significant proportion of the electricity is renewables from the Shiri barrage, but many challenges that are there, very old equipment, increasingly blocked up with, I think, the water hyacinth, but also the floods earlier on this year, January, February time, did huge damage to a power station that's probably going to be another 6 months or so until it's down. I can see Stacia sharing a file. Do you want to say anything to that, Stacia?
I'm just going to share a link to some of the files that give a summary on energy. But you are about right. Yep. It's gotten very, very bad this year. It was already bad. It's not an easy one to get over. A lot of the other things that we've talked about, whether it be devices or hooking up to the internet or use of technology, we work in the governance platforms, because often there's a couple of people in every governance platform, which is the village development committees, the area development committees, and then there are subcommittees of each. When there's diversity on the committee, especially include some of the private sector, they help other people. So leveraging different skills within the committees helps get over a lot of the barriers. But electricity is a problem for almost everyone, unless there's wind or solar nearby.
Absolutely, and I can see, Yusuf, your question about, is it nationalized? Yes, it is. So Eskom is the provider of electricity in Malawi, and a lot of our members, their partners, say you build a new school or something like that, and it can take many years to be connected to the grid, real delays and challenges there. But as Stacey said, it's important not to forget renewable energy and the role of microgrids. I mean, grid expansion is going to struggle to keep up with just population growth. We were involved with the government of Malawi historically in the development of their renewable energy strategy, which was part of the wider energy strategy, with hugely ambitious targets of, I think, going from 9% grid connectivity to sort of 90% in the space of sort of 8 or 10 years or so. Numbers from memory, so don't quote me. You're hugely ambitious, but incredibly hard. And actually, the importance of off-grid, and microgrid renewables is hugely important. Stuart, my colleague, please go ahead.
Sorry to jump in. I don't want to dwell on this point for too long, because I'm aware that there's other areas to chat about. Would the capital for those upcoming renewables projects, would that be coming mostly from tax revenue from the government, or would also aid organizations be playing into that? Or I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stuart, my colleague, is helping me, reminding me of a very good plug here. And he's put it in the chat box, and that's our upcoming renewables forum that's happening on the 8th of September. There's a teaser if ever there was one. I'll talk about those other upcoming meetings at the end of this conversation, but we'll talk a lot more there about renewables. Short answer to your question: yes, renewables are a part of what the government of Malawi wants to achieve, but is also, Scotland and a great many other partners and friends of Malawi are looking at how to support that. And the Scottish government funded MREAP project as well as others. Credit particularly to Strathclyde University, have done some really good work in Malawi on that. And I know Yusuf, you're Strathclyde yourself, so really encourage you to come to 8th of September Renewables Forum. I wonder if we could go back to Ken Undy, who I slightly unfairly put on the spot, and no worries at all, Ken, if you don't want to. But if you had any thoughts on digital inclusion, it'd be wonderful to hear from you, Ken.
Thanks so much, guys. First of all, I just wanted to comment on energy as well, as you guys have been tackling that not a long time ago. As in, one of the effects of one of the big issues that affects the other developments in, for example, small organizations. I'll give an example of the charity organization that I have been working on with for the past 2 years or so, of which we applied for electricity, and it's been about over a year since we paid to get our electricity connected after they've given the quotation and everything. So I think there's that kind of pressure that is there, like there's a big demand for SR, electricity supply, to connect to people, and at the same time, they don't seem to have enough for everyone. Someone was giving an example of percentage of against the population of Malawi, which is huge gap in terms of how many people have electricity connected and how many do not have. So our charity organization, it's very the fact that we don't have electricity, we don't have funding, and at the same time, we don't have electricity connected, because electricity would be a bit cheaper.
I think we just lost audibility there, Ken, if you can hear me.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. I think I lost my signal.
Back to you, we can hear you now.
Yeah, good. So I was just saying electricity is a bit manageable for this small organization like the one I'm working with, whilst we've thought about connecting solar energy, which we have, but it's just a small system and it cannot support all the other things that we've always wanted to do, of which, first of all, we've built the clinic, which is a community clinic, and we're trying to reach out to the community and help the children and older people as well to get help and healthy treatment for free. But then this clinic doesn't have electricity. We can't afford to buy solar panels and batteries to keep it running, because we're gonna need fridges and stuff to keep medicine. So it's a huge effect on the small organization like that. And at the same time, we've had different other ways we wanted to use if we have electricity, of which is to train the youth in the community about the computers and digital world, and for them to be at least being able to know what happened, because we talk about like bank accounts, we talk about internet and other things. It's very backward community, and so many people, they don't know how to do that. Example, I'll give an example. We've always wanted to pay our staff through the bank accounts, but it's been impossible because they all don't have a bank account. They don't have access to the bank because the distances is very huge as well. So it's one of those that we've really been affected. On the other hand, I think it's about how expensive it's been to pay for internet here in Malawi, of which it has affected or so on the digital part, which as an individual, I would say I've managed to do it. But on the other hand, I would give an example of, we've been trying to have some meetings with the board and with the other staff and the donors, but it's been not easy because other people do not have enough signal, or other people, they'll run out of power of their phone because they don't have electricity. It's like all around different, like energy, maybe the accessibility of data, accessibility of information, and others even not sure how to use their phones as well to be able to be connected to online meetings. So it's something which is huge, but I understand all the other work the organizations and other charities they are doing, which is quite important. And I'm really looking forward to the next meeting, which is the one Stuart was just reminding about, which I think will be very helpful as well.
Ken, thank you very much indeed. A really useful input from Malawi, and I see agreement from others in the chat box. This point around, you know, it's all very well transferring small amounts of money to people in Malawi, but actually, if they then have to travel to a bank to get that, you know, much of that can be used up in travel and time costs, which I suppose is an argument for putting phone credit into people's hands. That then, if that's a major outgoing, is perhaps a more efficient way of doing it. I see a question from Claire Burke, which is a really big question, and we in the office were talking about this just yesterday and saying, look, we really want to do a piece of work on this, particularly actually looking at school partnerships, and to what extent should we as a network be saying how better do we do digital? How do we make digital more inclusive to the point that we really sort of phase out big group trips versus the genuine benefits of meeting in person? So it's probably with the time remaining here, probably we're not going to be able to do justice to it. So I'm keen to reassure we're going to come back to this with some dedicated work. But Claire, I don't know if you wanted to share your reflections on this question of sort of in-person travel versus digital. Claire. Just jump in, Claire, if you want to, but no worries if not. And does anyone else want to respond to Claire's question of where do you think we should be aiming for? Actually, sorry, Claire's in a shared office just now. That's absolutely fine. What do you think we should be aiming for in the bilateral relationship? Should we be aiming for, much reduced travel or back to pre-pandemic levels? Or really try and alternate to move away from travel wherever we can. Any thoughts on this question before we begin to wrap up? If you do want to, it's a big question. I see Moira's comment, very difficult question to answer in the last 2 minutes of a meeting. Perhaps what I recommend we do is using our last few minutes to think about, from this discussion, what are the practical things that we could do differently? Or what are the recommendations we could give to ourselves as a network? And I started just scribbling down some of the things from my perspective. Perhaps if I read out this list of 6 pretty obvious things and then throw it open to final, what else should we be advising ourselves? So, firstly, to think about, asking our partners, what are the costs of your participation? To agree times of meetings sensitively, to use the right platforms that work for our partners, to look at the reimbursing costs in yes, administratively effective, but also Malawi appropriate ways, to use the resources and opportunities that are out there, like the communication and resource centers. What other recommendations or questions do you think we should be asking ourselves, informed by the excellent discussion today?
I think your thing about timing is a good one, actually, David. We just assume that the time we're having the meetings is the time we're having the meetings, and we would sort of stepping back, and maybe also the time our meetings go on, the length of our meetings, so maybe, yeah, I'll certainly take that back to our board and have a wee think about that.
It's a great point, Moira. Time and length as well. Any other final thoughts? If anyone wants to put up their hand, otherwise we will bring the meeting to a close. And I'm aware, this is just the beginning of a conversation, and there's a lot more listening we will do and continue to do at the Malawian side. And today's meeting has had less Malawian input than some of our others, somewhat ironically. And so we certainly don't see this the end, but the beginning. And we will, as I said, work with Stacey and others to share platforms that are there. Any other final comments? Just pop up your hand or just unmute. If not, I think I will bring things to a close. Perhaps, Craig, could you do the poll? So as always with these things, 2 very quick questions. It's useful for us, but it's also useful to report to our funders. How useful has today's meeting been for you? And I would just like to also do a quick share screen to tell you about other upcoming events. Hopefully that pops up. We're just quickly putting together a meeting next Wednesday, August the 24th, looking at understanding the impact of devaluation of the kwacha and also other associated cost of living issues in Malawi, looking at the implications of the Ukraine-Russia war, the global food shortages. So a really good discussion next Wednesday about that. Again, quite an open space discussion. At the end of August, 31st of August, we've got a great meeting looking at multi-faith religious education in Malawi and a comparison with Ghana. Dr. Yona Matemba of the University of West of Scotland speaking there. On the 8th of September, we have the Renewables Forum, which we've talked about. 21st of September, the Business Investment Trade Forum. 29th of September, Youth and Schools Forum. And then into December, Higher Education, Water Forum in January, and into the new year. What we're trying to do generally is to try and give dates a bit further ahead. And this is also with an eye to digital inclusivity. And what we'll do is obviously, as we get closer, we'll populate them more. So we don't want to be too early, too prescriptive too early about what we'll cover in events, but being a bit more advanced planning. So some of those dates are there. I think that's everything from me. Just to say thank you very much for your participation. Please do give us feedback. Drop us an email if you found this format useful and you want to continue it beyond this sort of summer series. Let us know if you're itching to meet in person to share a Mzuzu coffee or a Malawi gin. I appreciate for our stateside guests, that's maybe a little bit harder. We are nothing more or less than a community of like-minded people in Scotland that work with Malawi, underpinned by a sense of friendship and human solidarity. We want to be led by what works for you and what really delivers for the needs and priorities of our Malawian partners. So please give us feedback and we will respond to it. Feel free to unmute to say goodbye, but a big Zikomo Kwambiri from me. Thank you very much indeed.